Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia, and if you're new here, welcome. We are so glad you're here. I have a stage 5 clinger today. Here's my baby. Can you say hi? Today we are going to be talking about sourdough. I have gotten so many questions about sourdough starters, how to make a loaf, so we're going to talk through all of that in this video. So I have my sourdough starter already here. A lot of people name them and I have yet to name them. I was thinking Dwight because we're huge Office fans, but if you guys want to name my sourdough, leave it in the comments below. You can tell it's active. It has all the bubbles in here. I'm going to talk through how to get your starter to this point. I have another video where I do my starter, so I will put that up here. And I also have a downloadable recipe, so I'll put that in the description below. What you're gonna do is you are going to start in some sort of vessel. I recommend wide mouth mason jars, something that's wide enough that you're able to easily pour in and out of, and something that can just lay a lid on top of. So you don't want anything where you have an airtight lid. Like this is literally, I just have the metal part laying on top of my mason jar. So I recommend a wide mouth mason jar, but again, any sort of vessel will work that looks like this. It has to be glass so you can see into it though. You're gonna take your vessel and you're gonna put 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of filtered water. There are different recipes out there that call for whole wheat flour. There's unbleached flour. There's bread flour. Honestly, for me, the whole wheat and you can get white whole wheat. This is just what I had when I started, so that's why it is what it is, but that's what's worked best to get my starter to stay active. I've tried it with unbleached flour, I've tried it with bread flour, and I didn't have any luck with either of those. This is going to be a 7-day process to get your starter going. This is real life. All right, I had to put baby down for a nap. She's so tired, but she hates for me to not have her, so she's napping now. So let's get back to it. So day 1, 100 grams of flour of your choice, 100 grams of filtered water. It has to be filtered water. It cannot be tap water because it might carry some sort of bacteria that would kill everything that needs to grow. You're going to do that on day 1. And then day 2, what you're going to do is you're going to pour out half of this. So they call that discarding. So you're going to discard half of what you started for day 1. And I suggest putting a rubber band wherever you end. So day 1, you should have probably a starter up to here. I would put my rubber band here and see how much it grows, okay? Day 2, you're gonna go ahead and pour out half of that, and then you're gonna refeed it. So you're gonna put another 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of filtered water. You're gonna make sure everything gets mixed really good. I always scrape down my sides. I make sure I look on the bottom, everything is mixed together. Then you're gonna set your lid back on top. You're gonna move your rubber band or piece of tape or marker, whatever. You're gonna move that, and then you're gonna let that sit for another 24 hours. At this point, you should start to see some sort of activity. You should have some bubbles on the top. You might have just a few little ones here at the bottom, but you should start to see something happening. If you're not seeing anything happening on day 2, don't worry, you still have plenty of time to get it active. But I would suggest putting it in maybe a little bit of a warmer spot. In my house, we love it cold in here. My starter does not. I have to turn on the oven light, and then I just set my starter in the oven with just the light on. And sometimes I'll have to like crack the oven door a little bit just to get it to about 70 degrees is where my starter feels most comfortable. And then it'll start to get very active. So if you're on day 2 and you haven't seen anything bubbling, I would probably move it to a little bit of a warmer spot. And then day 3, same thing. You're going to discard half, feed it again, another 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of filtered water. Make sure it's mixed up really well. Put the lid back on and set it away for 24 hours. Day 4, you're going to do the same thing. Again, discard, refeed, and then at this point, your starter should be pretty active. On day 4, you should see, it should look a lot like this. Like this isn't the most active starter in the world, but you should have bubbles all throughout. It should be like a sour smell. That is your last day of 24 hours. On day 5, you're gonna discard again. You're gonna refeed 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of water, and then you're gonna let it sit for 12 hours. And then you're gonna do the same thing. And you're gonna do 12 hours till day 7. So on day 7, you're gonna discard half, refeed, and then on day 8, you should have a very active starter. It should have at least doubled in size, and then you can go ahead and use it. If you have any problems and you're thinking something's wrong, a lot of times you'll notice it's wrong if it doesn't smell sour, or you're always gonna have like this, I'm gonna call it crust. I hate that word, but it is what it is. On the top, if you start to see some sort of like mold or discoloration on here that isn't the color of your starter, that means something's wrong. You're growing mold and you're not growing an active starter. Discard it, the whole thing, clean your jar, sterilize it, make sure you have nothing in there, and you'll have to start over. Once you get it going, you can have this starter for a lifetime. One friend just messaged me and she's like, hey, do you have a sourdough starter? Can I have some of it? And yes, of course, I'm gonna give some to her. And then other people, they really just wanna start on their own, which is why I'm making this video, because I've had so many of you guys asking how to do a starter and how to make a loaf of bread. And I feel like I'm at a point where I can help you. So we have our starter here. Now what the heck do you do, right? You have your starter. The next thing you're going to want to do is make a basic loaf of bread. We're going to go ahead and bake a loaf. You're going to see that whole process so that you understand, after you've done your 7 days of making your starter, how to get to those loaves of bread, okay? What we need to start our sourdough bread is we're going to need a scale, and I highly recommend you getting a scale to make your starter. I think that was one thing that I failed miserably at. I refused to get a scale for the longest time, and I'm like, I'm just gonna do some of the recipes call for like a cup or 2 cups, and I would always try and do that and it would never work. So these are like $8, and I don't know why I was so stubborn about it, but just pick up a scale if you're really going to start making bread. It's so helpful, and I promise you, you'll use it every single day that you're making your bread. You need some sort of mixing bowl. I don't have the best mixing bowls. I have a wooden bowl that I love. I think it's from Crate and Barrel. I'm not really sure. It's very wide and it's hard to see on my scale. I really want to get some sort of like ceramic bowl or something that's taller and skinnier so that I can see the scale numbers a little bit better. But for now, this is what I have. You only need 4 ingredients for making this basic loaf of bread. You need your starter, you need flour, you need water, and you need salt. So I'm gonna grab those things.
For this recipe, your starter needs to be very active. And I also use bread flour. You can use all-purpose unbleached flour. I do 500 grams of flour, and then I add 350 grams of filtered water. And then I just use my hand to mix. I think it's just easier, and I honestly like to get my hands dirty. This is probably one of my favorite parts of making the bread. Feel free to use a wooden spoon or a mixer. If you want to, that's perfectly fine. You can see here that the dough is starting to form. At this point, it should be pretty sticky. Then I'm going to grab a damp tea towel or thin cloth and cover it. I'm going to go ahead and let this sit for 30 minutes. Once the flour is hydrated for 30 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and add 100 grams of my active sourdough starter. And you can see here that I am just pouring it right on top of the already mixed dough. And then I'm going to do 12 grams of salt. This is going to mix really well into the dough. And again, I'm just going to use my hands to get all of the ingredients mixed in. This could take a couple minutes just to get everything mixed in since that dough is already formed. But you'll start to see the change in the dough dramatically through this step. You can see it's way more sticky, it's pretty shaggy. And because I used whole wheat flour, you can see that the dough is turning a little bit more of a tan color. So again, I'm going to cover with a damp tea towel and I'm going to let that sit for another 30 minutes. Now we have to perform the stretch and folds. So what I do here is I pull up the top of the dough and then I'm going to stretch it up and fold it over onto itself. And then I'm going to turn the bowl a quarter of a turn and continue to doing these stretch and folds. I'm trying to get at least 6 or 8. Sometimes I lose track of how many I've done, but at least 6 or 8 in each of these stretch and fold sessions. Every time you make the bread, it's going to be a little different just depending on the temperature in your house, the humidity. So you may have to bounce the dough a little bit just to get it to stretch as much as you want, and that's perfectly fine. You can tell the dough is starting to take on a completely different texture. I'm going to go ahead and cover it again with my damp tea towel and let it sit for another 30 minutes. Now I'm going to do the second round of stretch and folds. Again, I'm going to lift up the top of the dough, and then I'm going to fold it onto itself, turn my bowl a quarter of a turn, and continue doing that 6 to 8 times. During this process, you're really going to see that the dough is starting to form. You'll get little bubbles that you can see here in the dough, and you're going to just keep stretching and folding the dough. Once I've done 6 to 8 stretch and folds, I'm going to cover it with my damp tea towel and let it sit for another 30 minutes. We're going to do another session of stretch and folds. Again, pulling up the top part of my dough, stretching it, folding it onto itself, and then turning my bowl a quarter of a turn, doing this 6 to 8 times. You're really going to see a difference in your dough at this point. You should start to see more bubbles forming, and the dough should be a little bit more stiff and not so sticky. I'm going to go ahead and cover it again with my damp tea towel, and then I'm going to wait another 30 minutes. It's time to perform our last set of stretch and folds. Again, I'm going to pull it up from the top, stretch it, and then fold it onto itself. And then I'm going to turn my bowl a quarter of a turn and continue doing that 6 to 8 times. At this point, I noticed my dough was a little bit more stiff than normal, so I'm just kind of pulling it apart a little bit more to get that stretch out of it. I'm going to cover it with my damp tea towel, set it in a warm spot for at least 8 to 12 hours. At this point, I cover my basket. I used a bowl because I could not find any of my baskets for some reason. I have no idea where they are. I think they might have got taken out to the garden. But anyways, I'm going to flour that, and then I'm going to transfer my dough, which has risen. It's hard to tell because my bowl is so shallow and wide, which is why I want a new bowl. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and flour my surface, and then I'm going to start forming my dough. You can see here it's sticking to the bowl, which is what you want, and you're just going to gently pull it out of your bowl onto your floured surface. And then once you get that all out of the bowl, you're going to start forming your dough. So I kind of do like a burrito roll, I guess you could call it. I am just tucking and rolling it until the sides start to come together. And then I roll it towards myself and tuck the dough underneath itself, if that makes sense. You can see here kind of what I'm doing. And then I'm going to transfer that dough right into my basket. When you transfer your dough into your basket, make sure that the creases are on the top. And then you can go ahead and just slide this into a plastic bag. Yeah, I just use a Walmart bag. I know it's not the best thing in the world, but it works. So I'm going to tie that to keep the moisture in, and I'm going to put that in the refrigerator. You want to put it in your refrigerator for at least, I say 12 to 24 hours. So overnight is perfect. Now it is finally time to bake the bread. I know it feels like it's been forever. I preheat my oven to 450, and I do put my Dutch oven inside the oven while it's preheating. Right before I'm ready to cook my bread, I pull it out of the refrigerator and then I put it on a piece of floured parchment paper. My kids are always popping in and out of these videos. It's so cute. I think it's cute. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and pull my bread off of my tea towel and put it onto my piece of parchment paper and let it sit for a few minutes. And then I'm going to flour the top of the bread and start to score it. I have not learned how to do, oh my gosh. I have not learned how to do fancy designs into my bread yet. That's something I'm still kind of learning. So I just take a razor and cut into the bread just so when it bakes, it can expand and lift as it needs to. I just use a razor blade that I have. I don't have any fancy tools as of yet. So then once I've done that, I'm going to pull my Dutch oven out of my oven, take the lid off, and then lift the bread into the Dutch oven on the piece of parchment paper. I'm going to then put my lid back on, and I'm going to put this in my oven at 450 for about 35 minutes. 35 minutes seems to be the sweet spot for me. Once it's baked for 35 minutes with the lid on, I'm going to open up my oven and take the lid off and bake for another 15 to 20 minutes until it's golden brown. Once the top is a golden brown color, I'll remove it from the oven. You can see this is a beautiful loaf of bread. I'll go ahead and lift the parchment paper and bread out of the Dutch oven onto a cooling rack. And then I'll just remove that parchment paper and let the bread cool for 30 minutes before I cut into it. But that is it. That's all it takes to bake a loaf of bread. It is time consuming, so just make sure you have a day or two to go ahead and make your bread. But it is so satisfying. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.